Hello everybody, and welcome to my review of Attack on Titan Season 4, Part 3, Part 1. At least I think that's what it's called. Now, before I review this episode, I first need to gush about how much I absolutely love Attack on Titan. It's easily my favorite anime of all time. It just has such intelligent and masterful storytelling. It's visually stunning, it has incredibly beautiful music, it's epic as hell, and has really nuanced and complex characters. I mean, even the side characters are just as intriguing and well developed as the mains, and are probably even my favorite characters of the show. And they all get their moments to shine and have their own personal life philosophy and how they see the world. So even if you don't like some characters, they're still really understandable and you get where they're coming from. So I think it's pretty amazing how Isayama is able to make you initially hate a character, and then within one episode of showing their backstory, you can fully sympathize with them and even all the terrible actions they've done in the past. And most of all, I love the themes that Attack on Titan explores and how it generates so many interesting and thought-provoking discussions, especially in the later seasons. Before I started reading the manga, because I got a bit impatient with all the waiting for the new releases, I used to chat and speculate with friends for hours about what all the characters were doing and why, and what hidden motivations they might have. And I love how part of the theme is about testing the characters' convictions, and through that, it raises some really tough questions about human nature and war and morality and the greater good. And even though it's a pretty depressing show, like what the characters have to go through and how much they have to suffer, it's still got such a hopeful message about, like finding a reason to keep going and searching for that smallest shred of hope in the darkest hour and all that kind of good stuff. So it's just really rare to have a show that does basically everything right in terms of story, direction, music, and just everything. And I think that's why it's so successful, and it's also why I love it so much. My only real criticism, at least for the anime, is how it's been released. I think all the waiting between seasons and part seasons kind of hurts the show's momentum. Like for me, I was so hyped when watching Season 4 Part 1 in particular that I went straight to the manga afterwards because I couldn't get the story out of my head and I didn't want to have to wait anymore. And I actually really struggle reading manga, so Attack on Titan is the only one I've made an exception for just because I was so desperate to continue this amazing story. But now that I know the ending from the manga, there are a couple of major issues I have with the story and how everything unfolds in the end, but I'll save that discussion for once the anime is fully complete so I can discuss it freely without risk of spoiling anything. So back to the anime, I think releasing it in such weird segments is a little strange and just spoils the enjoyability and viewing experience. I think maybe they should have just held off on releasing this Part 3, Part 1, and just waited until they're ready to release the rest of the anime entirely. But I'm really curious what anime-only audiences feel, so in the comments, please let me know. If you only watch the anime and you haven't read the manga, do you find it frustrating the way the episodes have been released, or do you have no problem with it, and you're just enjoying the ride? Now, about the episode itself, I think it was fantastic. Everything was done so well, and it was beautifully animated, and it's just what you'd expect from the anime at this point. I thought it was interesting that usually Attack on Titan is a little bit more subtle with its messaging about what it's trying to say and how it wants us as the audience to feel. Like generally, it's usually left quite open to interpretation and debate about what each character is doing and why and whose side we should be on. But this episode in particular really hammered home the whole concept of compassion and trying to understand each other and owning up to your own mistakes. Like between Reiner, Connie, and John, where Connie was like, "This is how you felt all along, Reiner, and you were in so much pain and I didn't even try to understand you, and we're actually no different. I'm just like you now that I've betrayed all my friends." And I really liked this moment for Reiner because he's probably my favorite character of the entire show, and I liked that his friends are finally acknowledging how conflicted he must have felt when he had to betray them and how much guilt he struggles with. And then Reiner goes on to extend this level of compassion and understanding to Eren as well when he says that maybe Eren wants them to stop him. I also liked that the Marleyan commander, during his pep talk to the soldiers, says that this is all happening because of their own hatred towards Eldians and Paradise Island, and that they ultimately created their own monster. And I always like this in stories when characters finally acknowledge what they've done wrong and that they are the cause, if they are indeed the cause. I'm not too sure how realistic it is for someone to have that level of insight when they're about to face off against this huge monster and be like, yeah, this is our fault. But it was great to see them finally admit that they're the cause of this. And even more instances of people feeling sorry for what they've done was the parents of the warriors, and also the Azumabito matriarch for bringing Eren and Zeke together, and even Armin apologizes to Eren when they're in paths and says that it's their fault for pushing Eren this far, even though I don't really think Armin is necessarily to blame. So this ended up being quite the recurring theme in this episode. And it's the right moment for it too, because usually in a story, just before the big showdown, the protagonist has to go through their growth arc so that they can learn from their lessons and show that they have changed from the beginning of the story to the end of the story. But in this case, it was just multiple characters who went through this. And I think it's a lovely sentiment to have, and that the show puts forward about trying to understand each other and people accepting when they've done something wrong and deciding to do better. I also want to discuss Eren and what he's up to. One of my favorite things about Attack on Titan is the clash of ideologies between characters. Like, everyone has their own convictions and philosophies and basically ideas on how they think things should be and how to go about making this a reality. And they're all willing to fight and die for this cause. And again, this is why I think the story is so masterfully done, because there is no true villain. You just have a lot of conflicted characters who are fighting for what they believe in. And this was especially prominent in season 4, once we reached Mali and learned their whole side of the story. And I loved the debate among fans that rose from it about whose side to be on. But I think at this point, it's pretty clear that Eren has become the villain of his own story, and that the rumbling is a bad thing and needs to be stopped. Like, the episode itself dedicates a good 10 minutes to demonstrating the horror and devastation of what Eren is doing, and even Eren looks pretty depressed doing it too. So while I admire Eren's determination to make the hard decisions and also have the will to carry it out, I still think what he's doing is overall pretty narrow-minded and short-sighted, because he essentially wants to eradicate the rest of humanity just to save Paradise Island and to protect his friends. If Eren was doing this with like a grander reason behind it, like if he thinks humanity needs a reset, so he just decided to kill everyone and start again, that would be a more compelling argument that maybe Eren is onto something here. I mean, of course, it's still a terrible thing to do to wipe out all life, but at least Eren's reasoning would be more altruistic in nature, and he's doing it for the good of the world rather than just to save his friends. But this isn't a criticism of, oh, the rumbling shouldn't have happened. I just think morally Eren's in the wrong, but of course we need the rumbling because this is the climax and this is fiction, so it makes sense that Eren will carry this out. But I guess it's also in line with his character, because he's always been more of an explosive and in-the-moment type of person rather than a strategist or a big thinker. In terms of Hanji's death, it could just be me, but I always thought it seemed maybe a little unnecessary. I mean, like, what can one person do to stall the rumbling? Especially someone who's not even a Titan shifter. But the episode does make a good show of justifying Hanji's sacrifice, because Hanji does succeed in slowing down the Titans enough for the Alliance to take off. But I feel like this could have been accomplished with a few coordinated attacks from the Alliance so that Hanji wouldn't necessarily have to die and they can all escape alive. But again, for the story's sake, I think it's more poetic and impactful that Hanji did die, and so Armin can become the next commander of the Survey Corps. And Hanji's death was a really great hero moment, and ultimately a happy ending for them, because Hanji wanted to go out in a cool way and does. And it was also very bittersweet seeing all the deceased Survey Corps members, and it made me kind of sad to realize how few scouts there are left alive now. And I thought it was great that even to the end, Hanji still loved the Titans, even when they were about to die from them. And also, just a little side note while we're on the subject of Hanji, I really liked that Isayama never gave Hanji a gender, and that this was a deliberate choice. And finally, I just want to talk about my favorite seasons for Attack on Titan, just because now that we're at the final stages of the story, there's not much else going on besides the big battle between Eren and the Alliance and wrapping everything up. and I'm still really looking forward to seeing the final fight. But to me personally, season 2 with Reiner, Ymir, and Bertolt's reveals, and then especially season 4 part 1, when we're first introduced to the outside world and to Marley and characters like Gabby and Falco, that to me was the peak of the story. Season 1 was great and very entertaining, especially during the female Titan arc, but season 2 is when I really became invested in the story and I fell in love with the characters, especially the side characters. And this was when Attack on Titan reached a new level for me, and I thought that the anime was truly something else and something special. And then season 4 part 1 came along, and that just blew my expectations completely out of the water. Because it's such a risky move, storytelling wise, to halfway through the story, switch to different characters and to a different setting, especially the characters that you're following are the enemy of the heroes that we've grown to love. And yet the show's able to get you invested in them and their stories, and you even care about them. So when the original heroes show up, destroying everything that these new characters that we've become invested in care about, there were so many emotions and it was so conflicting, and I loved every second of it. It's just such incredible mastery of world building and storytelling. So for me, this was where the real meat and juiciness of the story lied. But now we're in the last stretches of the overall story, so it's mostly just about resolving the final battle and tying up those loose ends. Like, this episode was literally just Eren marching from one location to another and the Alliance getting ready to stop him. Which is to be expected, of course, since this is the natural conclusion of any epic story, and I'm still really excited to watch that final big battle. We already got a taste of the fight to come, and the visuals and action sequences were amazing, and it got me really pumped for the final fight. But it's just a little sad that it's ending, so we won't get really complex and intricate storylines interweaving like we did in the previous seasons. And I kind of just wish that I could go back, I could erase my memory and rewatch the entire anime all over again from the start, and just relive and experience the whole story for the first time again. That would be so amazing. So that's it on my thoughts for the episode. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you thought of the episode in the comments below, and let me know what your favorite seasons are and why. And please like the video if you did, and subscribe if you want to hear more about my random ramblings about shows that I watch.